Right, come in. Your turn, I'm knackered.
Hetty, what the hell are you doing now?
Keep it down, love. Sinbad's got something stashed down here. Aye. Looks like we've struck gold. Nice one.
Could be anything. Look, don't get involved, Ed.
In the early 1990s, Light Oaks Park in Salford, just off Earlhams of the Height, would have been my little haven, a green retreat from the urban streets of Greater Manchester. The park had and still does have like a timeless quality, a place where there'd be laughter of children in the air and the wind would be rustling through tall trees that lined these like Victorian walkways. We'd spend countless hours there running about up and down hills and, you know, cycling bikes and playing on the swings, creating adventures out of thin air. It's a bit of a cliche, but it was a simpler time, a period of like innocence, and it felt like the world was full of possibilities and hope. I remember the park's old stone benches and the weathered iron railings. They'd be covered in this sort of luminous green moss that you see on usually like metal separations between play areas or stuff, places where you're not supposed to go. You know, you've probably seen that about. And there'd be like a soft dappled light that would filter in through the leaves. I've got quite a strong memory of that. It was a place where families would picnic a little bit, friends would gather, and it'd just be like, it'd feel very carefree. It was essentially a playground and it belonged to us, and we were free to roam about it and use our imagination. But amidst all of this familiarity and, you know, the pleasant feeling of being around people that you knew or people that you'd grown up with or neighbours and friends and, you know, people walking their dogs and feeding the ducks, there was a face that stood out. A man who seemed to be there often, lingering on the edges, watching. And he wasn't really like the other adults. Something about him felt off, and he didn't quite belong around laughter and play. And me and my friends couldn't help but notice him and probably fixate on him. There was definitely a strange air about him, something that made me and my pals feel uneasy. We were curious, you know, kids are, aren't they? You know, if there's something out of the ordinary, they point it out, they don't squirrel it away. You know, they'll be like, what's that? Or who's he? Or what's that noise? Or what's that smell? And this was no different, you know, who we were saying, like, who's this man? Why is he always here? Why is he, like, you know, not coming up to us, but, you know, you'd look down the end of a field and he'd be stood there and you'd You'd be like, there he is. What's he want? Eventually, curiosity got the better of us and we decided to approach him. It was a bit scary because obviously he's a fully grown man and he's unknown. We don't know what he wants, or I think we saw it as a bit of a dare. You know how kids can collectively persuade the group to do something that they'd never dream of doing on their own. It felt a lot like that. I'm never gonna walk up to this guy as maybe an 8-year-old kid and have the courage to say, what do you want? So we decided to approach him together, and we walked up to him, and one of us, it wasn't me, it was this kid called Simon Gittins, walked up to him and said, excuse me mate, what time is it? I was looking up at him. I remember looking at the side of Simon's freckled head. He looked like he looked, like when a kid blushes. It was a bit like that. Well, it was like that. He was blushing. And the man looked down at him and kind of had like a smile on his face. It wasn't like, if you see a relative that you've not seen for a while and they smile at you, but you feel, you smile back. It was a smile that was probably reserved for, what would it be? Like when you get away with something, like when you get something that you don't really deserve, or when you prevail, when you probably should have been found out. Like if you go to Sainsbury's and you get you pick up like an expensive sweet potato, but when you go to the till, you put it in as just a standard like white potato, and you get it for much cheaper. Or say, like you put like fennel through as a brown onion, something like that, and you get away with it. That little smile that you have to yourself, that was the smile that was on this man's face. It was a smile like he was taking something that he probably shouldn't, but he wasn't going to get caught. So Simon had said, excuse me mister, what time is it? And as he smiled, that brown onion smile, he said, in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, 6:45. And the words were strange and unsettling. I didn't really understand them at the time, but I could tell just by that smile and the tone in his voice, there was a hint of something inappropriate that made me feel uneasy. Even though we didn't really grasp the meaning of it, we knew enough to feel uncomfortable, and his response was wrong, and it confirmed these odd feelings that we'd had about him, seeing him about, walking about on his own, sometimes with a shopping bag, but not really going anywhere, just sort of kicking his heels. And from that day on, the park, even though we'd still go, it was like it had like a shadow cast over it. That man's presence lingered in our minds like a dark thread woven into our memories of Light Oaks Park. In 2019, I moved back to near the area where I grew up. I was living in another part of the city, and I moved back, and one of the first things I did was go for a walk around Light Oaks Park, and it always struck me that when I left. This story had always just made the place seem a little foreboding, and I don't know, just left me with a bit of a weird, unsettling memory of the place. And I walked around and it was largely unchanged. It was there was people walking the dogs, there was kids playing, riding bikes, feeding the ducks. The moss was still on the railings. I'd never really fully understood what that substance was. It was, it wasn't rust, but it was on things that would rust. But then it was on, I remember seeing it on like fences and stuff as well, and fences don't rust, do they? So I don't really know what it is. I think it's something to do with being under trees or near trees. I've asked people who are close to me what they think it is, and they don't really seem that interested, so I guess I'll never know, really. But yeah, it's definitely present in Light Oaks Park, and obviously there's that cliche of things feeling smaller when you return as an adult, and it sort of did, yeah. But it's it still felt sizable, and as I entered the gates, I half expected to see the quarter to sex man, but obviously I didn't. He doesn't live in the park. But yeah, I'd moved back into the area, and I started to think that maybe, as an adult, I could sort of reclaim the place and put a lot of the ill feeling I'd had for other things that had happened in my childhood to bed and move on. And that can be the case when you go back to somewhere, but if you leave it too long, you can sort of lose a sense of what it was that was so scary or so upsetting, or you're different. It was what, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm not very good at maths, but it was a long time ago anyway. And the person I am now, hopefully, has changed somewhat from the child I was back then. I still live in the area, and I don't live that far away from the park, and it's quite nice. There's bits and bobs nearby, like shops and stuff. The other day I thought I'll head out and nip to Sainsbury's and do what I do at the self-scan. I wanted to make a soup, so I put a few things through as onions, and made my way out of the shop and decided to walk back home. Got a coffee on the way. It was it wasn't that nice actually, but yeah. And I just turned the corner to where my house is, and this little boy came up to me and said, "Excuse me, mister, have you got the time?" And I looked down at my shopping bag and my corduroy trousers and my zipped up cagoule, and this smile came across my face, and I looked the boy straight in the eye, and I said, "It's just coming up to 5 to 4.